Good morning, students. We have been trying to understand the history of India after the downfall of the Mughals. One of the most important developments after the downfall of the Mughals is the expansion and consolidation of British power in the Indian context. The Britishers in the beginning had come as traders, and after trading for some time, they developed political ambitions. It was not accidental, it was intentional. Some of the historians have given us a view that the expansion and consolidation of British power in India has been accidental. Not taking this view into consideration, if we examine the rise of Britain as an imperial power in Europe, it very clearly illustrates that the British power had political ambitions both in Asia and Africa. And when the time was convenient for them, and when there was a political vacuum that was created in such areas, the British power started consolidating and expanding their power. So the same thing happened in the Indian context. So today's topic, we are trying to understand how Britain has expanded and consolidated its power in the Indian context. So today's topic is expansion and consolidation of British power in India. To make a beginning, we will have to understand the British imperialist history. So the first slide is basically trying to give you some ideas connected to the British imperial history. The entire imperial history of Britain can be periodized into two phases. First, the empire phase, across the Atlantic towards America and the West Indies, and the second empire beginning around 1783. Peace of Paris can be taken as one of the landmarks, and swinging towards the East Asia and Africa. Okay, so first it was towards Atlantic and America, then it was towards East Asia and Africa. So these are the two phases. So in the second phase, they had the idea of building an empire. So the imperial history of Britain started with the conquest of Ireland in the 16th century. Okay, the English then sprang up the new Romans, charged with civilizing so-called backward races throughout the world. So this has been their, what should I say, catchy words: backward, uncivilized, under-civilized. So these kind of ideas were floated, and then they entered, and then eventually they conquered and expanded their political power. So when it came to the New Romans also, they charged with uncivilization and called them backward. And this was the word, two words which they used throughout the world. For this, the post-Enlightenment intellectuals of Britain, in particular, and of Europe in general, started certifying themselves as civilized vis-a-vis Oriental peoples and others. So this was a kind of an argument. It was a kind of a logical defense of their imperial aggression. This kind of words: Oriental people, uncivilized, backward areas, backward races. These were all a kind of a defense logic that they were trying to build up against their imperialism. The basic point remained, or the basic fact that remains, is that they were basically imperialists at heart, and they tried to unfold their imperialism on the entire of the world. So for that, they had developed a defense mechanism for which they called it, they were Oriental people, or they were backward people. Owing to the various spatial and situational forces, the nature of imperial ideology of Britain changed over time, but its fundamental remained the same. This point is self-explanatory. Okay, so now with that kind of a background, we know that Britain was an imperial power. It was it tried it in Europe, it tried in Ireland, and we will just see how the British power in India started expanding, and how what are the historical circumstances, and what are the important battles that eventually made Britain as an imperial power in the Indian context. Okay, so in the mid of the 18th century, India's various historical forces were at work, consequent to which the country moved towards a new direction. Some historians regard the year 1740, when the Anglo-French struggle for supremacy in India began, in the wake of the War of Austrian Succession in Europe as the beginning of the British period. Okay, so we are just taking one point, that is the War of Austrian Succession in Europe as the beginning of British period and its designs in relation to India. So this is one view, and some others see that the year 1757, when the British defeated the Nawab of Bengal at Plassey as a designated date. So War of Austrian Succession is taken as one of the beginning points in Europe. And when it comes to India, the Battle of Plassey in the year 1757 is taken as a starting point. Some other historians, or still others, we got 1761, the year of the Third Battle of Panipat, when the Marathas were defeated by Ahmad Shah Abdali as the beginning of this phase in Indian history. So this is another perception. This is another view. Okay, so we are just examining different views. We are saying that we are trying to say that Austrian succession is one of the starting points. In the second phase, we are saying that Battle of Plassey is the starting point. In the third phase, we are saying that the Battle of Panipat, in which the Marathas were defeated by Ahmad Shah Abdali, was the beginning of the British phase in India. Okay, so 3-4 views which we have examined. However, all such chronological landmarks are somewhat arbitrary because the political transformation which began around that time took about 80 years to complete. So this is a fact. So we are just trying to take some kind of a chronology to say that this is the starting point. But all this is individual historical opinions. But the fact is that it almost took 80 years for the British to complete their consolidation. So as we think of 1761, the British would certainly come to mind because of their first victory over Nawab of Bengal at Plassey and over the French. So if you take that year 1761, what is that importance of this year? In that year, the Nawab of Bengal was defeated at Plassey and the French was also defeated. But we would not entirely write off the Marathas, and that would probably also consider the prospects of Hyder Ali. So the Nawab of Bengal was defeated, the French were defeated, but there were other forces like the Marathas and Hyder Ali. So all forces were not defeated, 2 forces were defeated. So in fact, it was a period of Indian history in which it would be probably a mistake to interpret in terms of what we know in the present. Okay, so the point here is that when we're trying to understand Indian history, we cannot just make a mistake in interpreting this is the present, this is the continuity. I mean, it is an event which is spread. The consolidation and expansion of British power is an event which political event which is spread over a period of time. Okay, so nonetheless, the circumstances under the British, which the British succeeded, are not clear, and few bottlenecks which they faced were not a serious nature. So, I mean, here the political resistance against the British penetration in Indian context, it was not that of a serious nature. I mean, it was not that the entire of India was standing up. India was politically divided, and you had regional independent kingdoms, and among the regional independent kingdoms itself, there were differences of opinion. So they were not able to come up with a unified resistance against the British penetration. That is what we mean here. So it is this paradox which makes the causes of British success in establishing an empire in a matter of considerable interest. So, I mean, various political reasons, no absence of a single political power, regional powers, nature of feudalism, unorganized military forces. So several features that were our political conditions that were prevailing in the Indian context made a conducive atmosphere, or created a conducive atmosphere for the British to establish their empire in the Indian context. Okay, so the entire process of expansion and consolidation of the British power in India took almost a century, which means 100 years. So that is the reason we cannot just say this is the starting point and this is the ending point. The expansion and consolidation, it almost took a period of 80 to 100 years. So in these 100 odd years, the English used many diplomatic and military tactics apart from other mechanisms to finally emerge as the rulers of India. Okay, it's very self-explanatory and very clear. In these 100 years, they used many diplomatic and military tactics. Both war and administrative policies were used by the French to impose their power over various kingdoms and finally to consolidate the rule over the entire of India. So there were, like for example, administrative policies, like for example, the doctrine of lapse, subsidiary alliances. So these were all some kind of policies which the English started in India, and these were done to impose their power over the various regional independent kingdoms. And by doing that, finally, they consolidated the entire Indian subcontinent. Okay, so the British were not adverse to using unscrupulous tactics to exploit a situation or a regional ruler to get their way, their own way. Okay, self-explanatory. Okay, the causal forces and factors for the success of the British can be estimated as follows. Okay, so we will just see what was the condition on the eve of British conquest. We will first see, in our previous classes, we have seen that they first concentrated on south and west, then they concentrated in the east. Okay, so here we will just first see what happened in Bengal, because Bengal was one of the most important areas, and Bengal had emerged as a major power after the decline of the Mughal power, and it was one of the richest provinces. So Bengal, the richest province of the Mughal Empire, included present-day Bangladesh, and its Nawab had authority over the region constituting present-day states of Bihar and Odisha. That is a large area. That's a very large area. So that is the reason Bengal was very important. So Bangladesh, Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. So this was a vast stretch of land and a very important stretch of land. So exports from Bengal to Europe consisted of raw products such as saltpeter, rice, indigo, pepper, sugar, silk, cotton, textiles, handicrafts, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so there were many export items from Bengal, and which had good market in the Europe. So Bengal was territorially an important region, and economically, in terms of trade, it was an important region. Okay, so the English East India Company had a vital commercial interest in trading in Bengal. So trade interest. As nearly 60% of the British imports from Asia consisted of goods from Bengal. So as we were telling, there are two commercial points, in fact. One is Bengal, the other one is Gujarat. These two areas, right from the beginning, have a lot of commercial importance, and a lot of trade flowed out of India from these two regions, Bengal and Gujarat. So Bengal becomes a very important region for British imports. Okay, so during the 1630s, regular contact of the British with Bengal continued when they established factories at Balasore, Hooghly, Kasim Bazar, Pata, and Decca. Okay, so these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places where they established their factories. These factories controlled the imports, exports, and the commercial interests. They took care of the commercial interests of the East India Company. At the same time, to some extent, the British government. So by 1690s, the foundation of Calcutta by the English company was completed, and the process of English commercial settlement in Bengal was also completed. So this is an important date. That is 1619 is an important date. The company paid a sum of rupees 3,000 per annum to the Mughal emperor, who allowed them to trade with Bengal and freely. So this is a very important agreement that they made with the Mughal emperor, paying him rupees 3,000 per annum. Per annum means yearly, and they developed the right to trade freely in Bengal. In contrast, the company's exports from Bengal were worth more than 550,000 per annum. See, just see the difference and the kind of profit that the company is making. The Mughal rulers were paid 3,000, and the quantum of trade was around 50,000. So, lot of difference. Okay, so in the year 1700, Murshid Quli Khan became the Deccan Diwan of Bengal, and ruled till his death in 1727. He was succeeded by his son-in-law, Shahuddin, who ruled in 1739. After that, for a year, from 1739 to 14, Sarfraz Khan, an incapable son of Murshid Quli Khan, became the ruler, and he was killed by Alivardi Khan. So this is a little brief political history of Bengal, which I'm trying to give you because it is connected to the political fortunes of Bengal. So Alivardi Khan ruled till 1756 and also stopped paying tributes to the Mughal emperor. Under the rule of these rulers, Bengal made unprecedented progress. Okay, so it was this particular period that Alivardi Khan stopped paying tributes to the Mughal emperor, and under certain rules, Bengal made unprecedented progress. There were other factors too which made Bengal prosperous. For instance, the rest of India was distributed by disturbed by inter-border disputes, the Maratha invasions, the Jat revolts, the external invasions by Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali. So as I was just telling you that there was a lot of political difference. There was a lot of political disturbance in the Indian context in this particular period, and the Britishers made the optimum benefit of this kind of political disturbance that was there in the Indian context in this particular period, and they were rewarded richly by interfering in these political differences. Okay, so the region of Bengal was fortunate enough to escape these challenges. The population of Calcutta rose from 15,000 in 1706 to 10,000. 15,000 to 1 lakh in 1715, and other cities like Dhaka and Mushirabad became highly popular. So urbanization was going on in Bengal. Okay, and the cities were becoming more populous. Almost all the governors of Bengal strongly resented the special privileges enjoyed by the English company, as it meant a huge loss to the provincial exchequer. Okay, so people were becoming conscious that the English rule or the company's rule was not beneficial to them, and they were suffering a loss because of that. Okay, so the friction between the English commercial interests and the Bengal government became the chief cause for conflict between the two. Okay, commercial interests and Bengal government, they became the two important factors. So during a short period between 1757 to 1765, the power gradually got transferred from the Nawabs of Bengal to the British, with the later defeating the farmer. So the British won over the Nawabs of Bengal and they captured the power in Bengal. So here we will have to see the kind of interaction that went on between Alivardi Khan and the English. In the year 1741, Alivardi Khan, the deputy governor of Bihar, killed the Nawab of Bengal, Sarfraz Khan, in a battle and certified his own position as the new Subedar of Bengal by paying a large sum of money to the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. Okay, so a sudden change that you can see. And Alivardi Khan ruled for a period of 15 years, during which he fought off the Marathas. The English took advantage of the Maratha incursions in Bengal by obtaining a permission from the Nawab to dig a ditch and throw up the entrenchment around their settlement of Fort William. So they interfered in the Maratha and Bengal conflict. Later, Alivardi Khan's apprehensions were drawn to the Carnatic region, where the European companies had usurped all power. On realizing this, he was urged to expel European powers from Bengal. So they initially behaved as if they helped Alivardi Khan, but when Alivardi Khan was becoming, even more powerful, the European powers or the British, they upsurged the power in Bengal. Okay, but he died in April 1756 and was succeeded by his son, Siraj-ud-Dowla, the son of Alivardi Khan's youngest daughter. So the grandson takes power. And now you have the Battle of Plassey, prelude to the Battle of Plassey. The officials of the company made a rampant misuse of its trade privileges and adversely affected the Nawab's finances. Okay, so now the Nawab is coming to a direct conflict with the company. Okay, so the English fortified Calcutta without the Nawab's permission. The company further tried to mislead him and compounded their sin by giving asylum to a political fugitive, Krishnadas, son of Raja Ballabh, who had fled with immense treasures against the Nawab's will. So these are all some small skirmishes that you can find between the company, the British, and other regional independent kingdoms, of which Britain was taking an advantage. Okay, so the next point states that the company on its part suspected that Siraj would drastically reduce its trade privileges in collusion with the French in Bengal. Thus, when Siraj attacked and seized the English fort at Calcutta, it brought about hostilities in open. So this is a point which is giving a clear idea of how the English came into a conflict, or how the English were directly coming into a conflict with Sirajud-Dowlah. Okay, so in the next point that we are going to see, we will have to mention that a prolonged black hole tragedy which took place during the period of Sirajud-Dowlah is believed to had imprisoned 146 English persons who were lodged in a very tiny room, due to which 123 of them have died. This is one kind of what you call incident that took place during the period of Sirajud-Dowlah, which people were antagonized against the British. The arrival of strong force under the control and the commander of Robert Clive at Calcutta from Madras strengthened the English position in Bengal. Okay, Clive forged a secret alliance with the traitors of Nawab, that is Mir Jafar, Rai Durlab, Jagat Seth, an influential banker of Bengal, and Omi Chand. Sorry. So Clive was taking advantage of the kind of skirmishes that were there in Bengal, and he opens a covert. Covert is a secret understanding with people like Jafar, Rai Durlab, Jagat Seth, and other influential people in Bengal, and goes against Sirajud-Dowlah. So under this deal, Mir Jafar was made the Nawab, who in turn would reward the company for its services. So they are making an open agreement with Mir Jafar, and they are planning to make Mir Jafar as the Nawab of Bengal. The secret alliance of the company with the conspirators further strengthened the English position. Okay, so the English victory in the Battle of Plassey on June 23rd, 1757 was a strongly decided before the battle was even fought. So it was treachery by which the British have won the Battle of Plassey, not on the ground. The point means that. So even before the war started, even before the war ended, the English had won the battle. So due to this conspiracy of the Nawab's officials, 50,000 strong force of Siraj was defeated by a handful of Clive forces. Okay, so you can see that Mir Jafar was a conspirator, and he helped the British in defeating Sirajud-Dowlah. Sirajud-Dowlah was captured and murdered by the order of Mir Jafar's son Miran, and the Battle of Plassey placed at the disposal of the English vast resources of Bengal. So that is how Bengal went into the control of the British. After Plassey, the English virtually monopolized the trade and commerce of Bengal. So Bengal has come into the control of the Britishers. Now we will see. Sorry. Now we will see why the Battle of Plassey is important. As a result of this victory, Mir Jafar becomes the Nawab of Bengal. He gave large sums of money plus the Zamindari of 24 Parganas to the English. Okay, the Battle of Plassey had political significance, for it laid the foundation of the British Empire in India. It has been rightly regarded as the starting point of the British rule in India. Okay, the battle also established the military supremacy of English in Bengal and eventually in India. The main rivals, that is the French, were ousted, which means that they were defeated. They obtained a grant of territories for the maintenance of properly equipped military force, and their prestige increased manifold. But there was no apparent change in the form of government, though the supreme control of affairs passed to Clive, on whose support the new Nawab, that is Mir Jafar, was entirely dependent for maintaining his newly acquired position. So he becomes a puppet in the hands of Clive. Mir Jafar becomes a puppet in the hands of Clive, and Clive becomes very important, and through the main rivals, that is the French, who were the main rivals, were defeated in this course. So we find literally Bengal going into the control of the British. The sovereignty of the English over Calcutta was recognized, and the English posted a resident at the Nawab's court. Okay, so after which Mir Jafar was increasingly, you have Mir Qasim also coming up, and the Treaty of 1760 coming up. So Mir Jafar was increasingly irritated by the interference of Clive. He entered into a conspiracy with the Dutch of Chinsura, but the Dutch were defeated and humbled by the English forces at Bedara. In November 1759, the treasury of Mir Jafar and his failure to make the payments due to the company annoyed the English. Meanwhile, the son of Mir Jafar died and started a fight for Nawabship of Bengal between Mir Qasim and the son-in-law of Mir Jafar, Miran, son. So Wanisrad, the new governor of Calcutta, agreed to support Mir Qasim's claim after a treaty between Mir Qasim and the company was signed in the year 1760. So the treaty was very important. Now we will have to see the Battle of Buxar. Another two important battles. These two battles, that is the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar, are the two important battles which made the British supreme powers in the Indian context. Okay, so we will just see the prelude or the pre-antecedents to the Battle of Buxar and see the important points of the Battle of Buxar and how the British became. So this is the last important battle. So the company had thought that Mir Qasim would prove to be an ideal puppet for them. However, Mir Qasim belied the expectations of the company. Ram Narayan, the deputy governor of Bihar, was not responding to the repeated requests of the Nawab to submit the accounts of the revenues of Bihar. See, here the point is the British were more interested in the revenue, and it was the point, it was not just the political control and the administrative control, but it was the revenue which this region was yielding becomes very important both for Mir Qasim and British, and this becomes the point of contention between both of them. So Mir Qasim could not tolerate this open defiance of his authority, and Ram Narayan was supported by the English officials. See, Mir Qasim was supported against Siraj-ud-Dawla, and now Ram Narayan is supported against Mir Qasim. You can just see the kind of a game plan that the British have in the Bengal region. So Ram Narayan was supported by the British English officials as a partner. The misuse of the company is Dastak of trade permit. Dastak means trade permit. A permit which was exempted, which was exempting goods specified for payment of duties by the company officials, also resulted in tensions between the Nawab and the English. So various factors are contributing to kind of a differences of opinion between the Nawab and the English. Okay, so the misuse of the Dastak means the loss of tax revenue to the Nawab. And this was very important. Revenue was very important. So it also made the local merchants face unequal competition with the company and the traders of the company. Okay, so this was point of contention. So by an imperial firman, the English company had obtained the right to trade in Bengal without paying transit dues or tolls. So these are all some kind of terms and conditions that were going on between Bengal and the British, and the violation of these terms and conditions becomes the point of contention between Bengal and the British. However, the servants of the company also claimed the same privileges for their private trade. The company's servants also sold Dastak to Indian merchants for a commission. Besides, they used coercive methods to get goods at a cheaper rates, which was against the spirit of the duty-free trade. The duty-free trade simply meant buying cheap in an otherwise competitive market. Mir Qasim decided to abolish the duties altogether, but the British protested against this and insisted upon having preferential treatment as against other traders. So again, the origin of points of differences can be seen on the economic grounds. The Nawab company tussled. So the company is now coming into point blank difference of opinion with the Nawab over the transit duty. Transit duty is duty levied on goods when they have been transported from one area to other area, led to the outbreak of the wars between the English and Mir Qasim in 1763. Okay, so reasons might be various, but the underlying factor is the economic factor. Okay, because everyone is interested in trade. Okay, so the English gained successive victories at Katwa, Mushirabad, Girja, Suti, Munger, and Mir Qasim fled to Awadh. and formed a confederacy with the Nawab of Awadh, Shah Wajid-Daula, and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, with a view to recover Bengal from English. So Bengal literally went into the control of English, and Mir Qasim runs to Awadh, opens negotiations with the Mughal Emperor, and tries to come back. Okay, so after this, you have the Treaty of Allahabad. According to the Treaty of Allahabad, we have certain important conditions in this. Robert Clive concluded two important treaties at Allahabad in August 1765. One of them was with the Nawab of Awadh, and the other one was with Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. Nawab Shah Wajid-Daula agreed to surrender Allahabad and Kara to Emperor Shah Alam II, pay rupees 50 lakh to the company as a war indemnity, and give Balwant Singh Zemindar to Banaras full possession of his estate. Shah Alam II agreed to reside at Allahabad to be ceded by him by the Nawab of Awadh under the company's protection. Issue of a firman granting the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa to the East India Company in lieu of an annual payment of rupees 6 lakhs was accepted. Provision of rupees 53 lakh to the company in return for Nizamat functions. Nizamat functions include functions such as military, police, administration, etc., etc. I did not want to annex Awadh because it would have placed the company under an obligation to protect an extensive land frontier from Afghan and the Maratha invasions. The treaty made the Nawab a firm friend of the company and turned Awadh into a buffer state. Similarly, Clive's arrangement with Shah Alam II was inspired by practical considerations. It made the emperor a useful rubber stamp of the company. Besides, the emperor's firman legalized the political gains of the company in Bengal. So finally, the company is becoming all powerful in Bengal, and Mir Qasim was dethroned as Nawab of Bengal and spent the rest of his life in abject misery and homelessness, and became a homelessness wanderer and died in the year 1777. So when we are trying to understand the way the British have expanded their empire, in the beginning they opened trade in the south and then in the west, and when they turned their attention towards the east, especially in Bengal, two important battles, that is the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar, were very important, which eventually made the Britishers the masters of the Indian subcontinent. We will stop here. In the next class, we will take up the further course of British plans in the Indian subcontinent, like administrative policies and other political implications that the company and the transfer of power, etc., in the next classes. Thank you.